This episode is brought to you by Hellmuth Johnson, a top Minnesota law firm ranging from individuals to emerging startups to multinational Fortune 500 companies. Focusing on transactional law, litigation, and appeals, Hellmuth Johnson attorneys are leaders in their field. David Hellmuth and Chad Johnson joined forces 30 years ago in 1994 with the goal of creating a premier law firm capable of handling complex and challenging cases efficiently and effectively. Today, Hellmuth & Johnson rank among the top 15 largest law firms in Minnesota with more than 70 Twin City lawyers serving clients in more than 30 legal practice areas. They offer a full suite of legal services to clients without sacrificing their original commitment to providing responsive and affordable legal representation. To learn more, go to their website, www.hjlawfirm.com. Where do you guys see the future of the Levelheads?
We're probably going to do some off-site or on-site.
Man on the street at IBS.
That's
she's gonna steal it.
We were actually, it's funny you say that. We're gonna do that this coming year. I haven't actually implemented it.
See, he's already stealing it.
I stole it. No, I was like,
the
problem with International Builder Show is how loud it is. And so I had talked to Doug, can you get a soundproof booth? And it's like the din in the background. Because usually if I do a live event, I want to use that recording and then use it for an episode.
See, this is how we end up. This is how you end up being successful, and we just have the idea, and we're like, let's do it, and then we do it.
You talk to my phone,
and then we air it, and it sounds like.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Curious Builder Podcast. I'm Mark Williams, your host. Today, I am joined by the Levelheads podcast. I've got Mike Conley and Zane Ellis and Jamie Verdura. Welcome, guys.
How you doing?
Oh, thanks for having us.
Glad to be here.
All right, you guys are from all over the country. We share a producer for our podcast. Shout out to Doug from Motif Media. Great, Dougie. Why don't you guys each give a quick, brief intro of who you are as builders? And I think on this episode, for those listening, we are not going to dive into the builder bios like we would on our normal podcast. I think we're going to talk mainly about essentially podcasting. Like, why is there so many construction podcasts? What is the benefit? What have we each found in our platforms? And then I thought this was a unique opportunity since we're all over the country. We've got California, Chicago, and Tennessee and Minnesota represented. I thought it would be a good chance to kind of check in, see how everyone's doing across the country. I thought we'd talk a little bit about CBUSA. They're coming here to Minneapolis for the summit. I wanted to kind of see how many of you guys are involved in your local markets. And then we'll maybe address a few questions that I get from the audience, and then we'll just kind of see where it goes from there. So without further ado, Mike, why don't you knock us off and tell us who you are, where you build, and just a little quick 30-second overview.
Sure. Name is Mike Connolly. I am co-owner of Greenside Design Build. We are a custom home builder in the western suburbs of Chicago, primarily focus on high-end residential. We're trying to stay at the top of the market here. Primarily build in a town called Hinsdale and surrounding towns that are fairly affluent. Been in this business all my life, grew up in the business. My father was a builder developer, so I've been on job sites since I was knee-high to a grasshopper. And unfortunately, I know nothing else. I don't even know how to podcast, even though we have a podcast. But that's
the secret. That's a secret ingredient, by the way.
To know nothing. Well, then if that's the case, I'm all set.
Yeah,
we're real.
Yeah. Perfect. All right, what you got, Zane?
I'm Zane Ellis. I'm in Knoxville, Tennessee. I own Collective Build Company. Just a couple of weeks ago, I announced on the podcast that I am not going to be building anymore. So did you miss that, Mark?
I did. It's funny you said that. In preparing for the show, I had it downloaded and I got busy today, and it was like the title was like Zane dives deep and opens up, and I was like, "Ooh, that's a juicy one." And then I got distracted. Evidently, that was the episode.
That was the episode. So if you haven't heard it, go listen to it, and we talk about my crazy story. And let's see. I enjoy long walks on the build site. And no, I do window and door sales now. And I've been doing that for about 3 weeks.
That would
And-
explain, by the way, I thought maybe you had switched over to Delta because I checked your website and it's down, just like the rest of airline travel. But that makes more sense if you shut down your building company, why it's down.
Yeah, it's down. We kept getting a lot of calls for customs, and we just shut it down.
401
So
file
yeah.
not found. Okay, that makes a lot of sense now.
Yep. So now you know. So if anybody's searching for me and I'm not found, then that's the case. But you can find me on it. This Instagram is still up. You can still find this on the Instagram, and you can find me on my personal Instagram. It's just my name, Zane Ellis. I got into building because I was a fourth generation builder. I tried to get out of it. I tried several different things, but mostly tried to be a rock star. That clearly didn't work out, and that put me into building. I just couldn't get away from it, and now here I am, just talking about it. So yeah,
Love it. Good intro. How about what you got, Jamie?
All right, I'm Jamie. I'm the owner of Verdura Construction. Excuse me. I am out in Half Moon Bay, California, which is a suburb about 30 minutes south of San Francisco. I've been building since I was 20, so it's about 25, 26 years in the trades. We are high-end residential custom home builder. We are appears to be an anomaly in the trades. We are a self-performing contractor, so I run a staff between office and field mechanics of just under 40. So we're a decent sized outfit, several projects, mainly focused on the coast. So a lot of coastal building, ocean view, stuff like that. Hillside builds out here in California. And we just get up and hit it hard every day.
Man, that sounds really interesting. We won't have time to dive into that operational quagmire. That does sound like quite a lot of work.
It's a little
I think
different.
I think you stressed Zane out. I think Zane just listened to you talk about how you ran that business. He's like, I'm out. I don't want to go down this road.
You need some windows, Jay?
Well, let's talk a little bit. Let's talk. Let's talk about the podcast. So you guys started the Levelheads. I know a little bit of the story. You guys are all in the same Builder 20 group. Is that right?
Yep.
And, that's how it got started. So we had been to a few meetings, and as you would do for any Builder 20 meeting, at least as we do, after the meeting was over for the day, we head to the bar for a few cocktails and a nightcap. And we had a few too many one night, and Zane came up with the idea that we should start a podcast, which we thought it was the best idea since sliced bread. So that's how the podcast was born.
They actually kicked us out of the bar. Mike took the bottle with him. Didn't you buy the rest of the bottle?
I can't remember.
I don't know.
I don't remember, but we took the bottle with us and our glasses with us, and we sat in the hotel lobby instead of the hotel bar.
So, like all good ideas, the podcast was born in a drunken mess.
Stay classy. Were you guys like sitting there writing out your like your audience and like your topics, or like how far down the wormhole did you go, or did you guys just keep going in circles?
I don't think we haven't yet.
Yeah, is that something you do, Mark?
We did say,
I mean, I thought I won. I thought I was a winger. You guys are taking it to a whole new level.
We did say, if we work really hard and concentrate on this podcast, about a year into the podcast, we're going to hit it big, and we're going to be invited onto the Curious Builders podcast as guests.
And here we are.
Look where we are.
Look at that. We are. Amazing. You're the culmination of your entire podcasting career has now been achieved.
Yeah,
that's nothing but downhill sledding from here.
Yeah,
sky's the limit.
So walk us through, I think one of the things that might be interesting before we kind of get into the nitty gritty. Well, actually, before we do that, because I do think we've never talked about it on the podcast. And I think a lot of people are always interested in ask us, when we go on the podcast or I go on the podcast, people ask how you start. And we obviously, that's the kind of the humorous side, but the logistics of it, I think a lot of people might be interested to know, like, I assume you and I have even handled it differently, and understanding that there's really no for sure blueprint on how to do this. Everyone has their own style and their own way. And so maybe we'll talk a little bit about that, but why don't we talk a little bit about your audience? Because we have similar crossover in audience that you obviously, given your wealth of knowledge and you build beautiful homes. Who do you find is your listeners, and who have been some of the people that you like to bring on the show? And I guess give us a little bit of what your formula is for when you interview people.
Sure. Who's
We've
going to take that?
gotten I mean, we've gotten kind of a mix, I think, don't you guys, of audience wise? I mean, we have
Yeah.
our clients, some of my former clients listen, some of my friends listen. It's really, when we set out to do it, I did have a goal in mind. I didn't, hell, when I started my business, I didn't have a 5-year plan. I was just like, I'm going to start a business in building. And I went out and I built a spec. And then, it just started from there. And there we went. So I just kind of started the podcast in the same way. I found a podcast streaming, platform and decided which one that looked best and figured out how to get it up on the internet. And as far as audience goes, I was going for builders that weren't interested in another just run of the mill podcast where we just give you, here's 8 ways to value engineer your project, and go through those 8 things. I kind of wanted to just be fly from the seat of your pants with let our 3 personalities. I really wanted to capture that bar moment like every single week, and I felt like that would be entertaining. So if we
Yeah,
could
I think
capture what happened in Milwaukee in that hotel lobby, Mike's got his hat turned backwards. He's got his 50th glass of bourbon in his hand, and I forgot what Jamie was drinking, but probably a tequila and soda and lime.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there with the bottle of bourbon, and, and we're all just shooting from the hip, So that's what we
and
do
yeah,
now.
and to repeat kind of what he said, we didn't want it to be the typical construction podcast, even though the 3 of us are builders and in the construction industry. We didn't want to just straight construction talk. We wanted to have some real chit chat, some kind of behind the scenes. Perfect example. Zane had an episode where he kind of opened up and gave his whole personal story, right? That has nothing to do with construction, right? We just
Yeah.
wanted to be somewhat personal, tell some real stories, kind of just buddies talking, right? Because that's exactly what it is. And there's the Joe Rogan podcast, right? Probably the most popular podcast out there, and that's what his podcast is. A lot of is just back and forth, regular conversation, and people are drawn to that. And that's something we wanted to capture. Some of that, we still wanted to bring construction into it. Obviously, that's what pulls us together. But we just wanted to have that kind of normal conversation, not be so stringent. Definitely try and be comedic, have some humor in there, because this business is stressful enough. You need some kind of an outlet to laugh and make fun of each other. And I think that's kind of the direction we go in. We do our main fan base, I think, is our people in the trades and our clients. So we do capture that. But there's the few outliers from that do listen. I've been stopped on the road and in a red light. Someone rolls down the window. Hey, I listened to the podcast, which I can't believe that happens. Right? I'm like, well, what's your problem? Why are you listening to our stupid podcast?
You're like, didn't the restraining order come in?
Yeah.
Which honestly, it's encouraging to hear
Mhm.
things like that, because at least you're not just talking to the wind. But
I mean, ours is quite different. We can contrast and compare a little bit. But some of the things that resonated with me, even being a guest on your show, well, maybe a month ago, is, the humor side of it. And I love humor, and I try to inject humor into most conversations, even when it's not appropriate, just because I think if nothing else, you can laugh a little bit. It, lightens the mood. And there's a lot of humor in life. And I like, Zane, what you shared, that really from the beginning, that moment, has really kind of been a common thread from the first time it was born in the bar, of just casual, levity. But you can obviously have deep conversations too, which you clearly do. And so
Yeah.
I would imagine that people sort of appreciate that. And, I guess comparing it to the Curious Builder, I don't personally ever feel like I have a lot of information to share as an expert. Someone said the other day, you can choose to be an expert or you can choose to be a guide. And this was a very well-known public speaker. I sat down with him for coffee and I said, when I started the podcast, I don't have any media training. I don't have any sort of broadcasting training. And I think that's obviously what appeals to people, because you're talking like a normal human being. And obviously we use building and business as a background of things we want to talk about and maybe break down some of the walls and kind of get real with people. And that's the information that he shared with me. He said, do you want to be the guide or you do want to be the expert? And I personally am not an expert. That's not my skill set. It's not really what I'm interested in. I would much rather try to get a bunch of people together. And, I guess if I'm guiding the conversation in that analogy, I fully embody that for myself. And, I look at our peers that are so much more knowledgeable. I mean, obviously a friend of the podcast for both of us, like Nick Schiffer. I mean, that guy is going to know more about building a home than I'll ever know in my life. And he loves it. People that really get into the weeds and details. And I think if anyone's going to start a podcast, I think the biggest thing that I've learned in my 2 years already is just be authentic, be yourself. And, the people that want to listen to you will, and they'll tune into you and your guests. And if you try to be somebody you're not, it's going to fall pretty bad. It's going to fall pretty flat. So I don't know. Do you resonate with that?
I feel like we've
100%.
done that. Yeah, I feel like we've all done that. I mean, it reminds me of, was it last week Jamie rolled in late with in the middle of the Brad Levitt episode?
Yeah.
He rolls in, he's like, "What's up?"
Oh, I bet Brad lost it laughing.
Yeah, he did.
Right in the middle of the podcast, and we were like, "Yep, that's it." And I mean, I wouldn't have it any other way. I mean, this is because that's exactly what would happen in a room if Jamie just walked up and the three of us were sitting there talking.
Although to be fair to Jamie, he was the first one on this video chat, which as Vegas odds would have it, I mean, someone just made like $1 billion because it was like 1 in 3 trillion the odds of him showing up. But his wife put $100 on him, and she's making out like bank.
That's it. We're retiring.
That's pretty funny. How what do you have? I just got you mentioned, Mike, about someone pulling over or mentioning like, hey, I listened to you. It is sort of interesting when people will bring up things that you've shared that you've sort of forgotten, and they'll say, hey, thank you. Like I was on a recent podcast and they reached out to me in just a DM on Instagram, and their comment was a little bit about this being authentic. They said, thank you for sharing that story where you failed. I really resonated that, maybe an Instagram or whatever, we obviously, our websites, we put our best foot forward. But I think one thing that podcasting in general does very, very well is allow people to break down those walls and sort of that media perception that we all portray, for good or for bad. And there's a place for obviously marketing. It's not like you're going to take a front page, and like showcase your worst job that's ever happened. You're going to showcase your best work because you want to attract it. But I think podcasting gets real and it connects with people emotionally. And I think that's what connects people to a show. So Zane, I bet you got a ton of support after your episode where you kind of opened up, and it makes me really interested to go listen to it, because that is the kind of things as humans, we really sort of latch onto and relate. What other stories have you guys experienced where people have reached out to you kind of in that vein?
Well, my clients are both, we had them on the podcast. Actually, they're airing this week, I think.
Today, you're right.
Today. So, but anyways, they're great clients and we became good friends, but they're religious podcast listeners and they love these guys. And they know that they're going to be out in California for the Builder 20 coming up next month. Excuse me. And they invited the guys to dinner. They offered rooms to stay in. They heard Zane's story. They actually reached out to me and to say, hey, we had no idea about Zane, and we're asking our doctor buddies here about everything. And it's just nice to hear that they're thinking of the guys. So they definitely feel like they're getting to know the guys, which is kind of neat.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say the same thing. I've had some former clients listen, and they didn't just listen to, episodes while we were building the house. Now they keep listening to the podcast. So it feels like people always say it feels like they know us when they talk to me. So, when somebody writes me a message about the podcast or whatever, I've gotten a lot of messages about the one a couple weeks ago, but people writing and saying like, hey man, it feels like I know you. We listen to the podcast and we just feel like we really know who you are. And I think to me that says that was the goal. The goal is to put yourself out there and us to be, authentically ourselves. And
How long have you guys had your podcast?
About a year and a half.
I think, yeah, a year and a half. It's just shy of a year and a half.
And did you
Yeah.
start weekly right away, or were you bi-weekly in the
No,
beginning?
honestly, we're still all over the place. We try to
Yeah.
get it weekly. We go through good spurts, and then we'll go through a patch where we don't. We just get busy. So I think we were on 44 or 45 episodes in a year and a
Yeah.
half.
So it's almost weekly.
Yeah, so it's kind of bi-weekly, whatever.
Yeah.
I don't think our public misses us when they don't give us that week. At least we haven't heard, but it's the fact that we're still at it, I think, speaks volumes, and we're going to continue. We enjoy it, and we do
Yeah.
get people call and say, "Hey, can I be a guest? Can I be a guest?" And sometimes you have tons of guests, and then some periods of times you're looking for guests. I don't know if you
Yeah.
experience that. Maybe you're more
I th-
popular and professional than we are, but
I think,
It's better
well, it's
looking.
interesting. When I started, I was concerned about production, so you're going to appreciate this. So I was on Brad's podcast, AFT's podcast, and now the Brad Levitt show. And I didn't realize I'd never even listened to podcasts. I was an audiobook guy because I like a beginning and an end. Podcast, for my addictive nature, is a little daunting because it's like if I get into something, it's like now do I have to listen to all the 200 previous episodes? I have a hard time starting fresh. I like beginning and ends. And so anyway, 30 days later, you talk about having no plan. I had no plan. I mean, I was like, I'm doing this. It was so much fun. It was so enjoyable. I love talking. I didn't realize how much I loved listening to people's stories and resonating with them. And then, I'm a little builder in Minnesota, by comparison to a lot of the other builders that we have on, I'm just a little popcorn shop. And yet, but somehow we're connected. I mean, here I am talking to 3 builders all across the country now. And I never would have thought a couple of years ago, why would I network and why would I spend so much time with people that are all over the country? And it's amazing. I can't believe how narrow-sighted I was in thinking that way. And I feel like the podcast for me has just been like absolute jet fuel on my already, pretty outward ADD, energy levels. And so now when I get to interview people, I'm just jazzed. I'm so excited to, meet people and hear their stories and talk about them and do whatever I can to sort of, shine a spotlight on them in that moment. But then it leads to these really neat relationships because then you see people at the builder show and then you start interacting with people on a regular basis. And all of a sudden now you have this commonality maybe of building, but you sort of develop this friendship because people share things that are pretty deep and real. And so you find the people that you really resonate with. And I think that's pretty special. I think that's really, unique. And I really applaud our industry because you'd think, the stereotype of being a builder is pretty, there's a lot of stereotypes, but, being warm and fuzzy and really comfortable with our feelings is probably not at the top of the stereotype for building. And yet when you talk to builders, that's the thing that they really grab onto. It's like, oh, they can relate to me. I understand. And so I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
yeah. So when you started, Mark, I think you mentioned this. Your guests were local, like to your own
Yeah,
market. Is that
that's
still kind of heavily that way?
so that's
Or
funny. I'm glad you brought that up. So what I recorded 10 right away because I wanted, 10 in the gun, if you will, of my giant revolver, evidently that has 10 bullets. And I didn't want to run behind. And so the problem is as I started getting sponsors, and I had sponsors before I actually started the podcast because I'm like, well, everyone tells you can't make money and everyone tells you it's expensive. I'm like, well, why am I doing all this if I can't at least cover my costs? So I went to my, the people that I have been doing business with for 20 years because I think that's what's unique about podcasting is like, at least for my podcast, it's, business owners, and we talk about business, we talk about life, we talk about their journey, but ultimately my peers are my listeners. And it's sort of, it's a different dynamic because it's not like I'm not selling my peers anything. I'm not going to build a house probably for any of them. And so it's a different mindset. For 20 years, whenever I speak or whenever I try to do, a sales pitch or whatever, I'm trying to get a build job from a client. So it's sort of refreshing that like, I don't have to sell anything. I just get to tell you what my opinion is on, whatever I believe in, those types of things, and also get informed by my guests. And so for me, it was, I want to interview. So I knew so many people having been, in my community for 20 years, and I really wanted to interview people in person. I love people. And so I'm like, well, what's one thing that's different about my podcast? Most podcasts are remote, and obviously I don't have Joe Rogan money, so I can't fly everyone in, private anyway to some cool studio. And so I was really important to me that everything be in person. So you're right. For the first year, other than maybe Brad and maybe one other person. Every single one was in person. And I do think there is a subtle difference in the interview style. When you are in person, the body language, the chemistry, the way you interact with people, it's different. I've gotten better at asking questions. Frankly, I've got better at shutting up, which I'm not doing a very good job of right now. But with the three of you, one of the thing I was going to contrast with is like I've never listened to a podcast or been on one or interviewed with one where there's three guests, which I think is a really cool dynamic. I mean, obviously the Modern Craftsman has two, but most other podcasts just have a single person. And I've experimented. I've had a co-host a few times just to kind of try it out and see what it feels like. But it has to be the right blend and sort of unique. And I think that's a real asset for you, especially with what Zane said about how you want people to be very relaxed and very comfortable. And I applaud that. I think that's really cool. And it's different. And I think it's working for you.
Well, the best thing about it is the three of us, jive really well together. There's three different personalities, and we're good friends outside of this. If you would see our text chain literally every day. Yeah, we'd have to kill you if you saw our text.
If you saw it, yeah.
But we are talking, communicating every single day. So we just have a rapport. We have a chemistry, almost a quasi bromance. I know that those two guys like me, but
sometimes
it works. It works, and I think that comes through on the cast.
Yeah. Out of curiosity, have the other builders in the Builder 20, not necessarily jealousy, because obviously they support what you're doing, but do you ever get a sense of like, oh man, I would really love to be a part of the Levelheads? Like, what does it take to be the fourth guest or the fifth guest or the host, I should say?
Well, I don't think we're there yet. Yeah, but we get them on. There's been a few guests that have been on.
Yeah, we've had a bunch of them on as guests, which is cool.
Mm-hmm. I think how have you, so you've had 46 episodes in, maybe we'll each share a little bit of what we've changed about ourselves. What are some things that you've changed since the very beginning, and to how you interview now? I guess, what are some things that you've learned, through interviewing that you're maybe a little surprised at, or sort of reflecting on like, man, when we first started, we didn't know this, but now when we interview people, it seems like that's just normal.
Well, for me, I just try not to do them too drunk. That's always a good one.
We've set the bar really high.
For the record, Zane and I are vehemently opposed to that. We want them to be drunk.
They would like me to be. They would like me to be drunk.
We would like for Jamie to be a little bit.
I actually haven't listened to one episode.
For real?
Swear to God, I've never listened to any other podcasts I've been on. Any of these, I won't watch this one. So I try to curb the F-bombs because it's not good for business. But other than that, I don't want to change, if that makes sense.
Oh.
I just
we don't want you to change. I don't think any of us have changed, right?
No, I don't know.
Maybe we've just gotten a little more, like, we'll do a little bit more prep work when we're going to interview somebody. Maybe just gather a few questions, and that's about it. Because our first one was with Chris Merchandani, and it was a shit show. We didn't know what the hell we still don't know what we're doing, but shout out to Chris. He bared with us.
I think to echo you too, Mark, I learned after listening back to listen more than I talk. And I think you feel like you've got to feel that if you have any sort of like empty air, you know what I mean? Like it feels like you're like, oh my God, and you freak out and you're like, I got to say something. And I think if you go with the flow of what's happening, then that actually works better. So, or I've learned.
It becomes a natural. I mean, obviously, the goal of, I assume, all of these, especially for your podcast and mine, is you want it to be relaxed and comfortable because people can sense it in your voice. I was able to get away with that, just by interviewing people in person. It became a natural conversation. Some people are not. One of the questions that gets asked sometimes on DMs is, and this was speaking to broader Instagram videos and things like that. But the question was, how are you so comfortable being on camera all the time? And I think this is a little bit, I would be like Jamie this way, is like, I don't have to change who I am. I'm just who I am. And so I from that standpoint, and it was interesting to hear Jamie's take on it, because that wasn't how I intended the question to be interpreted, but it was interesting to hear how Jamie interpreted that question. And what I've learned for myself is probably two or three things. One is, it's a disservice to not investigate the person, because I can wing it. I mean, like you guys, I can, I can Hail Mary pretty much every conversation. But if you're now that is, you're in year 2 and I want people to have value. I don't want people just to tune into the episode just to support me, while I'm very grateful that they would. I want them to learn something. I want them to get something out of it, whatever that might be. It might be, and it could be laughter. It could be relaxing. It could be, I think we all listen to music for different things. If you're working out, you want, workout music. If you're relaxing, you want, something else. And so I think there is a flavor for everyone, but what is it for you? So for me, I really wanted there to be educational content, a little bit of everything. But I want, more than anything, I want it to be real. The other thing is, again, the pause. And I interviewed, or didn't, the same gentleman who, well, I guess shout out to him, Jason DeRusha from WCCO Radio. He and I had coffee a couple months ago. He's a local Minnesota broadcaster, been in the business for a long time. He said, there's great value in waiting an extra beat. And I think that's what you just mentioned, Zane, that sometimes, especially us motor mouths like myself, like being silent is hard for me, because I either have a lot to say, or my ADHD is like going 20 questions ahead. But just like pausing, it's a little bit harder with you guys because there's 3 of you. And again, on virtual, it's hard to know who's picking up the baton. Where it's one-on-one, it's a little bit easier to know, who's going first and who's going second. And his comment is basically be comfortable with silence for one extra beat. And he goes, you'll be surprised what people will open up with. And I'm still practicing that, but that is something that I've learned. And I really appreciate, listening to other people and how they, conduct themselves.
This episode is brought to you by Adaptive, the software for builders that automates draws, budgets, and bookkeeping with AI. For over a year now, I've been partnered with Adaptive, and they've just been an amazing game changer in terms of efficiency in our time and all our bookkeeping. From the time we get an invoice, we import it into their system. The AI codes it, cost codes it, job codes it. All we have to do is review it, pass it through the people internally in the office, all digitally, and then it gets approved and paid all via ACH. It's becoming extremely fast and saving us countless hours a day and a week. When it comes to draws, all of our budgets now are set in Adaptive as well. So now when we cost code against the draws, we can do our change orders, and then with a click of a button, we can submit these draws to our title companies or to our homeowners for faster payment. If you're looking to save time, and if you're looking to be accurate, I highly recommend Adaptive. Additionally, if you'd like to listen to one of their founders share the story of Adaptive, you can listen to episode number 15 on the Curious Builder podcast.
This episode is brought to you by Pella Northland. For 19.5 years, I've been building homes, and 95% of all of my homes have used Pella windows. I couldn't be happier to call them a partner in our builds and our remodels. Whether you're an architect, a designer, or a remodeler, I'd highly recommend Pella windows. They can fit old homes, new homes, reclaimed, commercial, and really everything in between. Pella is a company that we trust and that we recommend to our clients. Additionally, in management, Peter and Ed have just been absolute fantastic people to work with, as well as mentors to me personally. So when it comes time to look for a window, I'd highly recommend Pella Windows. Find more at PellaNorthland.com. Also, if you're interested, you can hear episode 1 where I interview Peter and Ed together for a great listen on business and Pella Windows.
I don't know if I've thought about that. I've just thought by listening to the game tape that I always try to listen to what we do well and what we don't do well. And a lot of times I was like, you talk too much. You talk too damn much. And that's what I was telling myself.
Well, we do have critics. My wife being the number one critic. And she would call me the interrupter, the great interrupter. I interrupt everybody. I talk over everybody. So I apologize, boys, if that happens in this podcast.
Never,
because I still do it because I do listen. I listen to all the episodes before I release them, after they're released. I always try to improve.
Interesting. I don't listen to them before. I listen to them after. I always listen to them Monday when they release, usually when I'm working out. And I mainly because do you guys find that when you're interviewing somebody, it's not that you're not paying attention, but you're having a live conversation. I don't, unlike, again, maybe our spouses. I don't know if your spouse is like mine. My wife remembers everything I've ever said, evidently, because because she doesn't need me to repeat myself ever. And so, but like, I will not, shockingly, Mike is just losing it over there off screen. I will forget things that we talk about right now. And I find that listening to it when it comes out, like 3-4 weeks from now, like I feel like I'm a listener. Like I get to listen to it for the first time. I'm like, ooh,
Yeah.
that's kind of good. And sometimes it sounds so corny. Sometimes I'm like, I'll see if I can finish my own sentence, and I'll kind of like smile, like, oh yeah, that's what I would say. And then I'll say it and be like, yep, I guess I know myself. And then, but sometimes I'll get it wrong, and I'm just like, oh man. But anyway, I find great value in critiquing, like the ums. I'll critique again the speech pattern, and I find that sometimes it's just time and comfort level. As you do this longer and longer, you get more comfortable with your pacing.
Sure. I feel like we've all gotten better with that. I mean, even though Jamie must be a pro. He doesn't listen to it.
He
he's
needs
just
no improvement.
naturally-
I am who
he's
I
just
am, and I'm
naturally
not
gotten better.
changing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to start to second guess myself. And
He's got
No,
that
he's-
deep DJ voice that just sounds good on. He just sounds good. He knows it. I'm not
Jam
gonna
and
listen.
Jamie
I'm
on
not listening. I
96.9.
don't listen. I don't listen to myself like he's so cool.
I do not listen. Not a one.
What do you think? Where do you guys see the future of the Levelheads? What are some things that you're excited about even this year? And if you were to look, longer term, what are some things that you're excited about maybe doing, or you're just kind of happy to kind of see where it goes?
We're probably gonna do some off-site or on-site remote episodes. We've been talking about that. So that's probably the
Man on the
most
street at
immediate.
IBS.
There you go. The man on the street at IBS. That's
We-
She's
Yeah,
gonna
that's right.
steal it.
We were actually. It's
steal
funny
it
you say
now.
that. We're gonna do that this coming year. I haven't actually
Oh,
implemented it.
see, he's already
with
stealing
the-
it.
Oh, I
No,
knew it. He
I-
stole it.
No, I
Damn
was
it,
like, 'cause
Mark.
the problem with International Builder Show is how loud it is. And so
imagine,
I
yeah.
had talked to Doug, can you get a soundproof booth? And it's like the din in the background. Because usually if I do a live event, I want to use that recording and then use it for an episode. And if you're at IBS, walking around man on the street just interviewing people, which I think is really cool, and I do want to do it. I haven't figured out a way. How do you control the background noise? It's so loud. And would somebody actually want to listen to it, on a regular, or is it not for them? Is it for something else? I don't know.
This is how we end up. This is how you end up being successful, and we end up. We just have the idea, and we're like, let's
We
do
just
it,
go.
and then we do it.
You talk to my phone.
And then we air it and it sounds like
Yeah, pretty much.
This episode is brought to you by blah, 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 blah. I don't know. I think it's a great idea, and I think other people are. I think you're going to see an explosion of that too. I'd heard too that you maybe either have to get permission for video recordings if you're.
Inside. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. A new product.
Does it though? I hate rules. I mean, the idea that you're going to take a bunch of builders and you're going to say that. I mean, how many people are walking around with video? I mean, in today's world, we are
everything's Instagram.
honestly regulating people's video. I don't know. I'm very much against that.
Maybe we can get Anderson to build us a booth.
See, I mean, maybe we'll have to do competing. I'll have Pella across the street. We'll have our competing sponsors.
Yeah.
So I have approached it. Does Anderson have a booth at IBS? Because they'll do that.
They didn't last year, but they generally do. Yeah, they didn't last year.
Yeah.
They generally do though.
New Hampshire.
Yeah.
Have you guys? Quiet, Mike.
What other sort of remote is that? Kind of the main thing was the man on the street. I mean, you don't also have to do it at IBS. I mean, you could honestly do it wherever. I'm thinking think of how much success Jimmy Kimmel's had, walking down Hollywood Boulevard or, somewhere. I can imagine Jamie, interviewing people in San Francisco and they think they're on TV. They'd probably open up for all over Jamie.
You guys will be in California in a month. Let's do it. We'll run it.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll make it happen. I like to see. I mean, we talk about getting more sponsorship and getting, and everybody's super busy and trying to figure out how to chase that out. How do you navigate that?
That's hard. Nobody tells you, or nobody told me anyway. Maybe they told you when you start the podcast. At least the way I've run it, my burn is pretty high. Just with I have a marketing admin. That's probably 70% of her time is helping with, the social clips and the posts and the, we've established essentially about seven different platforms off of the Curious Builder brand now. And some of them we haven't even announced. I mean, I can talk about them now. Why not? But some of it. So the problem is I keep getting all these new ideas because again, we've talked a little bit about the sense of community. It started with the podcast. We launched the Spanish version about a month ago, and that's been pretty slow just because I don't speak Spanish. So it's also hard for me to personally engage with it. So, Belkis Cruz is an amazing interviewer, fluent in Spanish. She's from Nicaragua, actually a past guest of mine that I was so impressed with. I'm like, will you be our, Curious Builder in Espanol? I just feel like so many of our trade partners speak Spanish, and I don't want what we're talking about. I don't want the stories that we're sharing to be exclusive just to us because we speak English.
Yeah.
And so the hard part is getting that message out there. And so that's something I'm excited about. And the reason I related it to sponsorship is, it's expensive, right? I mean, not only to edit each one of these episodes, to publish them, the equipment, that's kind of a one-time cost, but there's a lot of, I think the thing that I don't even calculate is time. I'm probably at this time way overcommitted. I'm probably spending 2 days a week on Curious Builder branded things. But again, it's so far beyond the podcast because obviously a lot of people when they start, just record, mix it themselves, but it's a lot of work. And I was like, I knew I did not want to do that. It's just like, you can build a house. I mean, Jamie, obviously you're very involved yourself performing. I don't build any of my homes that way. I always tell my homeowners, if you see me working on your house, call the project manager, I'm ruining it. I mean, I'm not, if I start editing my podcast, we're going to have problems, real problems. And so I ended up hiring all that out, but that costs money. But then the messages that you're conveying in the community that you're building, your sponsors find value. And so I was able to make a proposition to, our people that I already buy a lot of products from, whether it's Pella or Adaptive or, Alpine Hardwood, a number of shout out to my sponsors over the years that have helped out. And they say, well, we believe in the community. So it's more that, the community, yours is unique because you could tap into 3 separate communities.
Yeah.
I think there's actually a lot of potential for you for sponsorship because you could each one have your own micro market and you could, divvy up how you want to attribute it to your sponsorship. Right now, we've got these collectives that we've started and it's called the Curious Builder Collective. It's essentially a light version of Builder 20s. And so locally here in Minnesota, we have, I think, 23. I'll cap it once we hit 30. But basically, we meet 4 times a year for 3 hours. And we're talking about contracts. And I'll bring in a lawyer, and he's just there as a reference. And we'll just talk about contracts. Like, how do you do pre-construction agreements? And so a lot of stuff that we would talk about Builder 20s, but no NDAs. Just like if you ask a genuine question, I'll answer the question, whatever it is. And I think the only 3 things you can't talk about is like, for monopolies, you can't talk about, price fixing. You can't talk about margin. I forget the other one, but honestly, it never comes up. So you're just talking about like how you run a business, and it's been very well received. And so I find a lot of value in that. And then of course the sponsors are attracted to that because now they see a bunch of builders getting together, and we're gonna launch it into 4 markets next year. I've got 3 of the states in mind, but I have to iron out some of the details. I'm kind of in the middle of those pitch sponsors now. And so for me, that's how I've sort of attracted some of the sponsors, is saying, well, I really like getting people together, and it's hard to get builders or owners of any company to go anywhere. Well, if they're coming for value and content, then the sponsors want to be there. And the only way to get in that room is to either be a builder or be a sponsor in that market. Well, now those sponsors are really excited because now it's relationship building. I'm not really into transactions. I want relationships. So if you support that local builder group, then that's a relationship, and the group will determine whether they want to work with you or not. And I don't want it to be salesy. I want it to be real relationships, and those are going to be deeper and go farther. We're going to be doing a sauna boot camp retreat. I'm really into athletics, and so that's something totally off wind, but I'm going to like, well, maybe there's other builders out there that need a mental break. And so we've got a coach coming in to talk about somatic breath work and like breathing through. You can use it for sports, stress, whatever you want. And then we'll do cold plunge and sauna. And then we're going to do a Curious Builder boot camp, 20 builders out in Zion National Park. You have to get off the airplane, check in your phone, no alcohol, 3 days. And I don't care if you're going to run a 5-minute mile or a 20-mile, you're going to sweat. And so I just care about effort. And so we're going to be doing some hiking, trail running, mountain biking, canyoneering. And then really it's just outside. I find that I get my best ideas being away from distractions, but being with other business owners. I want it to be sort of this breeding ground. Either want it to be a breeding ground of ideas or Lord of the Flies, and there'll be death and destruction. And this thing went off the rails. Yeah. So I know there's a long way of me saying like, how have I navigated sponsorships? I just keep doing things that I'm personally interested in, and then finding groups of people that want to do it. And then if enough people want to do it, ultimately sponsors are like, hey, we see value in what you're doing, and maybe it's a little different than what the market is, because a lot of stereotypes of builders aren't true. Some are, some aren't, and anyway, I don't know if I really answered your question, but that's kind of how I'm looking at it.
No, that was great.
Yeah, I mean, we're considering getting some T-shirts made.
They're thinking about it.
But don't think too hard about it. Don't think too hard about it. You'll hurt yourself.
We'll get back to you in 25.
I think we should. I actually think we should do this tour like Mark's saying, but we should do it at a bar like we started the podcast. Just go to bars all around America, invite builders.
Dude, you would kill it. Are you kidding me? There would be that would be amazing. And can you imagine the video cameras in the bars and what you would talk about? Oh man, it'd be off
the neighborhood near you.
But skip the podcast. That's going to be like a Netflix series.
Yeah.
Well,
it's like move over Pawn Stars or Pawn Shop Stars or Ice Road Truckers. You're going to have Jamie going into some bar in Idaho, some brass knuckles.
Well, you got to be
guys frame a foot for.
We've actually had about 48 episodes, and 2 of them we couldn't release. Just say that. It was too much fun at the bar.
Leave
the cutting room floor.
Yeah.
But I mean,
I used to be the cutting room. So I used to do all of our editing when we very first started, and we had that one that it was like live at one of our Builder 20s, and they were like, "Well, how was it?" And I was like, "We can't do this. We can't." No. Normally, I'm good with anything, and I hit record at the very beginning. Like, I mean, you were on the podcast. I hit record at the very beginning, and we just let it roll, and we catch as much as we can of whatever we can. At that moment, it was such a bad idea. But sometimes it works, and sometimes it really, really doesn't. And that was one of the times when it really, really didn't.
Yeah.
And that was a tremendous amount of work for Zane to edit all that in the early days, because we sucked, and maybe we were letting fly a little too. So it was like Swiss cheese. He was cut and paste and cut, and it just got to be so much work. So I'm glad we gave it to Doug, so Zane doesn't have to do all that crap, because you spent a lot of hours doing that shit.
Yeah, I spent hours doing it. Yeah.
I mean, a lot of it, do you find though now? I mean, it seems like, I don't know. I mean, I actually don't know. It would be really fun to be in Boston sometime and watch them edit. I'm not sure how much editing actually happens. I know there's a lot of like maybe audio adjusting and, highs and lows and bass level, but I mean, it seems like they pretty much just roll the video. I don't see a lot of major editing. I think one thing people often ask us podcasters, like, oh, you must edit a lot. And maybe Zane, you should speak to this, because I don't have experience with this. I mean, did you find like you had to cut a lot out, or was that you maybe sort of over editing? And whereas just maybe, hey, here's the beginning, here's the end. And you could make a note. I mean, obviously, if someone had to leave to use the restroom, or, something really bad happened, I've had mic fails. I've had episodes that didn't work because I forgot to hit the record button, or I had a record button on, but it was, muted. That's the one problem is that in some ways it's easier when it's virtual, because there's less things to go wrong. I have noticed I've probably had about 5 or 6 episodes in 2 years that I've had to ask the guest to come in and re-record, because one of the settings was off, where these, we use StreamYard, same as you. It's such a good platform that it really makes it, obviously it's idiot proof if the 4 of us can do it. So
what are you trying to say?
I'm pretty sure you know what I'm saying. I'm saying we got 4 idiots. And it turns out to be one of the qualifications to be a podcaster is to be an idiot. So there you go.
Yeah, no, it was a lot more work than I thought it would be. I kind of thought you'd just roll it in and push play. Of course, half of it is getting your intro music and lining everything up, moving things around, lining everything up, because sometimes these platforms don't exactly line up always 100%, like there may be a delay in somebody's feed or whatever, so you got to get them all lined up to where, when you just got done saying that, there's not a 5-second pause, and then there's me, and then Mike talks over me because my feed has a little delay. So that was really the most of it. But, and then, like you said, there's times that somebody's feed sounds like a robot for 10 seconds, and you got to, clip that and get them back in and clip them back in at a certain time. And the hard part is making it sound natural, when you're editing that because shit happens, and since Doug took it over, I don't think that I don't know, maybe we
he's
haven't
probably
had
doing all that.
anything
I
like
mean,
that.
he's a pro.
Exactly,
He's probably
but he's made it
fixing all
sound
that
very
stuff.
natural.
Do you think, and I don't know, I suspect, well, obviously Doug's listening to this at some point because he has to edit it, but I wonder if Doug's heart rate has ever gone over like 72 in his life. Like, he's a very even-keeled person, right? I mean,
really
he is just steady Eddie. I bet his wife loves him.
He's got to be really knowledgeable too. He's got to do that, 67 hours of construction podcast every week.
Oh man.
Oh yeah, he's a cool customer, that's for sure.
He is.
I think your mind would be like Beautiful Mind. I think you'd just be seeing clips. I think it'd be actually what I really want to do. Here's, you guys said you're man on the street. I actually am putting together. I haven't talked to Doug about this. I do need to talk to him about it, but I find I am about to. I really enjoy blooper reels, and it definitely fits my personality. I'm going to start putting together. I'd like to do quarterly, but I have enough content for probably daily. I would love to put together a bloopers reel. Like, have you guys done ad reads? And I usually just wing it. I'm guessing you guys do too. And you're just like, blah, 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 and you're just like, why can I not get this straight? You can have a conversation. Like, I was just having a conversation with someone today. Like, I can ad lib, no problem, but give me a script that I have to follow. Oh my word, it's a nightmare. And yeah, so I don't know, from your sponsorship standpoint, I know obviously Anderson's one of your sponsors. Do you have other sponsors as well besides Anderson?
Just Anderson right now.
Google, Facebook, all the big ones.
Ford.
So
Coca-Cola.
Awesome. Coca-Cola.
Anheuser-Busch.
Fresca. I actually tried to pitch Red Bull one time because Tyler Grace said that I was his polar opposite. It was like I had 3 Red Bulls and a line of Coke, and I was just like all revved up. That was how he described my personality. So I literally took that cut and I sent it to Red Bull and asked them if they would sponsor me. Just crickets. Nobody responded. I even made shirts and a hat with bottles of Red Bull on it and a line of Coke. It just looked like a snowdrift. And then I sent it to Tyler, but I took a picture of it and sent it to Red Bull, trying to pitch them and solicit sponsorship. Again, no response.
How did you know who to send it to?
I think that was the hard part. I didn't really know. So I just started probably their information page on their website.
Some receptionist is like, what's this?
Info at redbull.com.
So, for those out there listening that are, obviously we're making the bar very low in terms of starting a podcast. So you too can do it if we can, but don't be afraid to ask people for help. And, I guess my biggest advice would be just simply make sure you align with who you are sponsoring with. I've heard before where, people would, take, whatever funds they could get. And I get it. Like, you got to run the production. It's not cheap, unless you're going to self-fund it all. And then, what's the payout and what's the goal with it? Is it, community service? Is it in community? And that's fine. That's a noble cause, obviously. But, between time and money, these are not inexpensive hobbies. But anyway, making sure that you're essentially your sponsor doesn't tell you everything you have to do.
No, Anderson has been very supportive. I mean, even when we went up there, they were like, we love the podcast. And there were several people that had actually listened to it. Like, it was like, oh, you guys know about this? So it was, they were very supportive. And, they were like, oh, we liked the episode with such and such when this happens. And they've been pretty hands off and still listen to us, because when they were hands off, it was like, do they even listen to this podcast?
Yeah, do they know what's going on? But a big thing is the 3 of us are true Anderson customers, even before we are sponsoring us.
Yeah.
So everything we say is genuine. We don't read off a script. We just say what's in our heart.
Use the product and
Wait, so are we all admitting that we know how to read?
Yeah.
Well, I have staff for that.
No, I agree with
Jamie
you.
has staff to do that.
Yeah, I have staff to do that. Well, maybe just in that one, hopefully that was helpful for people listening that are considering starting a podcast. It's always nice to talk to others and kind of go through some of that.
I'll just make one little quick interjection there, Mark. If they are considering doing a podcast, contact Motif Media to produce that podcast.
Yeah, that's a big shout out.
Yeah.
A big shout out to Doug. He makes it easy. He makes it sound professional. Even us three lackeys, he makes us sound pretty decent. So if you're considering it, it doesn't have to be in the construction industry either. It can be anything.
Or the construction industry. That's actually a great name for it.
Mike actually specializes.
The construction industry is a great name for what we have.
I'm making a shirt.
Sorry, Mark. We're bringing you down. We're bringing you down, Mark.
That would be a good podcast name for construction too, though. Well,
it would be.
In the last 9 minutes of this train wreck, what is the state of the union? I'd love to hear what you're hearing, from the building side. Are you busy? Sales. What are your clients saying in terms of the market? I'll just give a quick overview because everyone's talking about, you've got interest rates, you've got the election, you've got inflation. How are you guys navigating those in your respective markets?
I guess I'll go first. It's going great. We're going gangbusters. We're staying busy. The phone is still ringing. I'd say the only negative side or negative pressure we're feeling is inflation hasn't stopped. This time last year, I thought, okay, we got through the interest rate raises. Inflation is, bananas. It'll probably level off, and it hasn't leveled off. Construction costs are still high. Now it's not skyrocketing like it was the previous years, but it's still going up. And we're finding that the projects we're bidding now, the people are shocked at where the pricing is coming in at. And we are too, to be honest with you. We didn't think the cost to construct would be this high. That being said, they're still pulling the trigger. Maybe we VE back a little bit. They're not necessarily making the house smaller, but they're just eliminating amenities like sport courts. So many houses have sport courts, and now they're pulling back. Say, all right, we're not going to put a basement sport court in. We're going to save $250,000. But other than that, it's still going crazy. People are still spending money. They're still buying property. They're still building houses. The phone is still ringing. Knock on wood. It's nice to see that in the Chicago market that we've had some price appreciation in line with the rest of the country. We've always been a market, even though we're the third biggest city in the country, we kind of had like a small town type aura with pricing. It was always very affordable. We weren't getting the numbers that you see in the coasts, and which kind of sucked because that translates to less margin for us as builders. But it's highly competitive too. That's another part of it. But all things considered, it's good. State of the union is still good.
And what does your pipeline look for, 1 year out?
Oh, we're bananas. We've got work for the next 2 years.
Wow.
And we've got 9 projects here. I'll tell you. We've got 9 projects under construction. We've got 5 in for either permit or design, and we've got 7 pre-cons.
Wow, amazing. And how does that relate to, let's say, your normal workflow?
It's probably what it was last year, but the last 2 years have been pretty good. It's more than we've been doing, say, in the last 10. This is the busiest we've been.
Wow, excellent. That's amazing to hear.
Yeah,
ours is a little slow. Well, it's not I don't want to say slow. It's slowing down, I should say, because it's still, we're still having the same issues that Mike's having with, with inflation and prices going up and all of that stuff. But there is a hesitancy, I think, here, just to kind of see what's going to happen next, what's going to happen with, interest rates, what's going to happen with inflation. Is there going to be a downturn? Because people keep talking about that. I think there's a hesitancy here, and it's slow, but it's still good. I mean, that's why we shut the website down, was because we were still getting a lot of interest in building, and so the calls were still coming in for sure. But if you talk to people around the area, it definitely has slowed a tick since last year. It's hit a speed bump, so still good, but slowing.
Out here in California, so we're on the the San Francisco Bay Area Peninsula, so there's quite a bit of money here. We build on the coast. Obviously, there's money there. Busy as we've ever been. Pipeline's good. Phone's ringing. Big projects are still there because they're usually deeper pocket clients. We lost a couple jobs where there people have 2 jobs where they actually shelved the project. They got the permits, price came back, and they just couldn't afford it. They didn't want to pull the trigger. So those projects are for sale, but as fast as they go for sale, I have a meeting on Friday with new clients that want to buy the project.
Do you own the land, or
I don't know.
You're able to
don't.
somehow stay on, or how does that work exactly?
Because I'm awesome. No, I work with the client
Because
initially.
he employs all of Half Moon Bay.
Yeah. No signs in front of the jobs, nothing like that. No names on the trucks, which is true. I get in with the client, and then they say, "Hey, I can't afford this. What can we do to get down?" I said, "You could change the scope. That's too much for us. We want to sell it. Do you have a realtor?" Well, yeah, I have a realtor. Then I get the realtor in, and then he goes, just for the up to him. All I want is whoever buys it, tell him Jamie's going to be the builder. And
Right.
here we are.
Here we are.
So it
That's
kind of
great.
works out pretty good that way. But yeah, pipeline full, busy for the next couple of years. Phones, negotiating a bunch of whales. Those take a while. It takes a year to bring down $3 million plus projects. Back and forth plans and changes, and they're going to get the other bids and all that. But keeping 40 people busy every week. So
Wow,
Helps a lot when you run the mob.
well, you're on the mob, yeah. No, but what I am noticing, I think the low range, there's been a lot of tech layoffs, right? And the tech, the mid-range techs are making decent money. We're usually working for the C wingers at our level, but that mid-range job, the kitchen remodels, the new decks and landscapes, I think are slowing down. And I'm saying that because I'm getting calls from subs that I've never got. Cabinet shop looking for some work, concrete pumper looking for some work. I have a lot of access to carpenters and laborers all of a sudden, especially this time of the year. Usually they're harder to find, but now they're calling me every day. So there's definitely a slow in the market overall. But
C-wingers. What the heck is
the
the C-winger?
CEOs,
C-suite. That's like your upper
C-suite.
level management.
It's not the mid-level tech. It's the guy who signs the check.
The
It's usually who
C-wingers.
we're building for.
Yeah, I mean, mine. I'd have the gloomiest news. We've had, I think, $3 million jobs either cancel. One is going to come back next year, but it's very slow here. Specifically for me, I mean, it's crickets. We have one house under construction, and then we just signed a couple remodels, well, which is fine. And then, but it's really, I noticed about a year ago the pre-con started drying up, and we're not a big company, and we do 4 or 5 projects a year. So I mean that part isn't it's not necessarily the timing of it, though, is more of a problem than the number. And so it's just interesting. But I've talked to a lot of builders here locally, and a lot of them are definitely down. You have a few that are just like, if you have a 3-4 year project, that's what I would say. That's one of the big benefits of being a higher level builder. If you have a couple big projects, especially if they're staggered, it really helps you even out the highs and lows. And as all being builders, we don't ever get to pick when a client wants to start and stop. And inevitably they all start at the same time and they all stop at the same time. And so you get these herky jerks, and it's so irritating. And one of my goals going back to the podcast is to have another stream of revenue to sort of even out some of that. Some builders do remodeling, and that's their even out. Some do commercial, some do, maybe some do service work. And I can see now, after 20 years looking in the rearview mirror, if you had a few other operations that could all be sort of, tied into construction or building, or even if not, just having some ways to even out some of the cash flow over time would be nice. Because we had 5 homes last year under construction at this time, and they all finished within 90 days of each other. I mean, it was a nightmare for the PMs because it's all your trade partners are fighting over each other for the jobs. And it's just, but then I saw kind of the end coming, just in terms of, that was when interest rates were 8.5% and people are really drawn back. And the odd thing was, for me personally, is that a lot of my clients pay cash. So you would like to say, well, interest rates really don't affect them, but in some ways it does, because if you can leave it in the market or just heck, you could just park it at the bank and make pretty good money. It was hard to give them the incentive to like go, unless there was already burning need. But pricing here continues to go up. I priced out a package on a home from a year ago, and it follows inflation. I think it was like 7-8% higher than it was exactly a year ago. So I see no really relief in pricing. I do think for at least in our market in Minnesota, I think if someone, clients always want a deal, whatever that means. But I think if there's one to be had, it's now to the end of the year. Because I do think regardless of the outcome of the election, people just don't like election years. I know I don't as a business owner, because people tend to grab on and just hold and just wait.
It's
And
uncertainty.
it's uncertainty. And we just, obviously it happens every 4 years. And so it just kind of seems to be cyclical. I wish I had it would be nice if I had a few of those 5 projects that were, had been staggered by about a year, because then it becomes kind of a non-factor. But anyway.
Mike said something I think that I have repeated to people that I think is really wise a while ago. He probably doesn't even realize he said it. He said, historically, the best time to build the house, as far as pricing goes, historically, the cheapest time to build your house is right now.
Yep. And, I love that.
A lot of people, we've had a number of projects over 10 years. We've had a lot of people be like, well, we're going to wait and see when pricing. And then after COVID, especially, it was like, well, we're going to see when pricing comes down. And you just wanted to shake them and be like, it's not.
Maybe a couple points on the lumber, and lumber's low now, but guess what? Fuel's up, wages up. I mean, it's inflation, right? So it's not coming down.
Everything else is up. So everything's going to follow inflation.
I 100% agree with you on that. We'll end this with, you guys did your rapid fire, which, by the way, I really enjoyed. One thing, shout out to your guys' show where you mentioned what Zane said about being relaxed and fun. I will say this, as being a guest, I don't know if I've ever had more fun than being on your show. So if you're thinking about being a guest, reach out to the Levelheads, because it's a hoot. That end is just a wild ride. I really enjoyed it. I felt like a game show host, at a bar. So I guess that sort of fits the theme, but that was a blast, man. Okay, so why don't you guys can each respond to, I'm going to give you 3 quotes, and I just want to get your thoughts on it. And right. I read a lot, and so these are the quotes. You guys can decide who's going to answer each one. So the first one is, boundaries create freedom. Jamie. How would you resonate with that?
Jamie, yeah.
Boundaries create freedom? I'm the wrong guy to ask on that one.
That's why you got to answer
it. I have 0 boundaries for me. That's the freest I'll ever feel. So,
all right, that's a good answer. All right, I heard this last week, and it simple scales, fancy fails.
Okay, I'll answer that. I think the simpler your systems are, I think it's easier to scale when everybody can kind of latch onto that, when everybody in your office, on your team, can latch onto that. That's easy to scale that business up. But when the fancier you get with your systems and your processes, your SOPs and all that stuff, I think it makes it really hard. When it makes it hard for everybody to follow and everybody to do what they're supposed to do, then you're going to fail as a business owner.
That reminds me, my uncle had a system similar to that. He used to call it the KISS system. What's the KISS system? Keep it simple, stupid. That was his system.
Yeah. That's it.
That's a good one.
Keep it simple.
Keep it simple. All right. Last but not least, Mr. Mike, the overachiever lane is never full.
The overachiever lane is never full. Is the overachiever lane on the right or the left?
That's up to you to interpret how you wish, sir.
I guess that means there's plenty of room for people to do their best and work hard and reach their full potential. That's how I take it.
I agree. I mean, I would, wouldn't you? Who's doing that one? That's awesome. Yeah, I can't believe you guys have a cricket machine. That's amazing.
And he brought it to the party.
That's awesome. If I had that, I would use that a lot. Oh my word, that's amazing. I can't wait for that. I hope that one makes the final edit for sure. In fact, I'm going to make a note. That is definitely going to make the 104 cricket scene. That's going to be the Instagram post for this one.
We've got a lot of
not consumption.
That's you guys are like old time radio. That's like that's like old time, right? You've got like the widgets and all the little noisemakers and like the night. You guys are like a 1920s like baseball team, announcers.
Yeah, welcome to the podcast.
See?
That'd be amazing. You guys should each get your own musical instrument, and as your intro, you guys can have your own little musical intro.
I call the drums.
Because have you guys done your is it harmonics with Doug yet? Has he done those with you?
No.
So,
I don't even know what that is.
please enlighten us.
So the harmonics,
Yeah.
I understand it. So like on the podcast, if you listen to it, and actually it's more the Instagram handles and the short clips, it'll go, and it obviously ties in with curious because it'll be like, and so he had me do like 7 times, and then that's actually, I think he called it harmonics, but basically it's like it's a verbal representation of what you are. So I don't know how you verbally do level heads. To me, I'm thinking a bunch of bobbleheads, the opposite of a level head, but that would actually be a fun fun. But anyway, we digress quite quickly on this show. But the point was that each one of you have your own little noise maker, and that when you guys do your intro, you got the squeaker, you got whatever you guys want to.
I want to be a gorilla.
No, go for it. Well, we will have
A whole nother episode.
Okay.
Yeah.
So funny. Here comes the crickets again. That's got to be Zane who's got that. All right. For those that want to tune in, the best spots to find you guys would be on Instagram under the Levelheads, as well as anywhere you download podcasts will be the Levelheads as well. Coming to you weekly or not. It's a dealer's surprise. It's up to you.
That's right.
But you guys if you guys appreciated this episode, if you like what you're listening to, reach out to them on their Instagram handles, give their show a follow, and I appreciate you guys' time coming on.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
We are happy to announce that we have a one-to-one coaching session that can be found on our Curious Builder podcast platform. So you can book a time with me, and it'll be 1 hour to ask any sort of questions that you want, talk about business, talk about life. Maybe you're dealing with a difficult client and you just want to maybe shop with another builder and say, hey, how do I handle this? Or maybe you're looking to rebrand your company. Whatever it might be, you can head to our website and book a time, and I'd be happy to sit down and give you that hour, and we can talk about whatever's on your mind. The podcast has now been running for the last 2 years, and it's because of people like you that are listening to the podcast, spreading the word, that our audience continues to grow. One of the ways that you as listeners can help support the show is head to our merch page, our shop page on thecuriousbuilderpodcast.com. You'll see that we have 3 different offerings now. We have a shirt that we partnered with Harnish on. We have a hat from BOGO that I use for ultra running. It's also just incredibly sweat resistant. So for any of you guys are outside in the sun working, the hat looks great, but it's also extremely resilient to sweat. And then of course our Hive notebooks. These notebooks are amazing. I was given one a couple years ago and I've fallen in love with it. The paper's made out of stone. It's waterproof. It's tear-proof. It's amazing. So if you like what you listen to, if you appreciate the show and the content that we're producing, please head to the shop page. Buy a notebook, buy 2, give some to your employees, give some to the guys in the field. We'd really appreciate it. Thanks for listening to the Curious Builder podcast. If you like what you listen to, please give us a 5-star rating and write us a review. It really means a lot. It's a great way for us to just understand what you like about the podcast and what we can keep doing. So like and review, and please share with your friends and family. Find out more at curiousbuilderpodcast.com.